well is, let's go ahead and click on that as we're recording this session. James will be speaking in a few moments when I present him. At the end of the time today, I will also share some upcoming events for ICF Orange County. Feel free, by the way, if you would like to have your camera off. I know sometimes I was joking with James a few moments ago, saying sometimes when you have the camera on a presentation, you're trying to look so professional and so businesslike. But I know sometimes you might want to be able to close your eyes or maybe have to excuse yourself and get some water or something. So feel free to turn your cameras off. Of course, keep your mics muted unless you're invited by James to ask questions and whatnot. Also, if you do have any questions, James will have times during this presentation to address those questions. But if you have something that you want to make sure to get out and you can't remember it and keep in your mind, feel free to put that in the chat. And if it's something appropriate to address, quickly, I'll interrupt James so we can address those particular questions. Sometimes you might have questions of clarification or asking something about that. So I think we are pretty much good to go. Great again to see all of you. Thank you for putting your location and what brings you here today. So I'm going to go ahead and read James's bio, and then I'm going to turn over to my friend James this day. James Garrett is a brain coach and founder of Brain by Design. Again, that's Brain by Design. He's spoken on stages ranging from Harvard to TEDx, and his work has been featured in the New York Times, Fast Company, and Harvard Business Review. He spent years doing research with some of the best psychologists in the world at Columbia, Tufts, and Yale. He's a content creator and course builder, and his course called Brain Science for Coaches has been rated as one of the best courses for coaches, and it's currently certified by ICF for 30 continuing coach education credits. He's a certified coach through the Whole Fit coaching program, and he also built one of the only brain-based positive psychology curricula in the Middle East and trained thousands of Arab youth in partnership with Queen Rania of Jordan. James is a rare combination of scientist, trainer, and entrepreneur. And in 2019, James launched the Deep Change Project, a personal journey to discover what's possible at the outer edges of neuroplasticity and to overcome fear. So my friends, it's my pleasure to introduce to you again and to turn this over to James.
Thank you so much, Daryl. I'm so grateful to be with all of you today. Thanks so much for taking the time, wherever you may be. I realized I didn't, as we were doing this, I realized I didn't put where I'm currently. I'm in Keene, New Hampshire, about 2 hours from Boston. So grateful that I know you're all very busy and you have a million things going. So really, really appreciative of the time. And that kind introduction, Daryl. We're going to be talking about a really fun, very cutting edge topic and very sort of complex topic. Complex because of the contradictions inherent in it. But also, I think of this topic as central to solving the puzzle of how we encourage both ourselves, but also our clients toward a path of growth. This topic is one that I didn't come to by my choice. I didn't really want to discover this. I don't really like discomfort. It's not something that if you were to say, hey, how'd you like to spend the day? I'd like to spend it in an uncomfortable way. I don't think that would be my answer. But I've sort of stumbled on it, and I've spent the last about 2 years trying to unpack the science of what's going on here, why it matters so much, and really, again, trying to walk away with some concrete tools, frameworks, and tools to really think differently about discomfort and to do this skillfully. It isn't discomfort as an end in itself. Discomfort is, when it's not serving any, bigger purpose or goal, it's really gratuitous. It's not necessary or helpful. It's really in the service of our goals and the service of growth that we're talking about discomfort. So I want to just jump right in. And looks like maybe Daryl, I need to be made co-host, I think.
Michael, if you could make a James co-host there, I think you have the... All right, there we go. You should be now.
Perfect. I believe I am. Yeah, thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to bring up a picture, and I want you to just think about the words that come to your mind if these were your feet. Let me just imagine you standing there, and ask yourself, what emotions come up for you, and just type them in the chat. Like, what comes up for you? Cold, burr, but that's a, I think that's extra burrs there. No way. Is this ice thick enough? No way. Frostbite, reluctance, pins and needles. Yikes, get me out of here. Discomfort, frightening. Back up, beep, 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 right? No way. I love it. All right. Good. You can feel the visceral kind of apprehension of this experience, right? Ice therapy, no way. ICF therapy too. Yeah, maybe there's some play on words there. All right. These are actually my feet. And for this last month of February, every day, so I live in New England, so it gets pretty cold around here. I've been doing an ice plunge, a cold water plunge. I'm not a cold water person. If you ask my family, they'll be like, yeah, he's usually the last one to get in the water. I hate it. I hate cold water. But I've been so intrigued by this idea of how do we get better at doing difficult things that I sort of had to do this. So I spent all 28 days of February plunging every day. And now, you guys, I wouldn't believe this if I hadn't gone through it myself. I love it so much now. I still do it, and it's March. What is it, 6th? I'm still doing it because I was just going to do it for February, but if I don't do it, it's like I miss it. I know. Sounds like that's impossible. Not me. No way. I felt the same way. All right. This is just an example with that same place of what this looks like. I know it looks like torture. I know it does. But this is how it feels when you get out. All right. So apprehension, pain, discomfort, unease, avoidance. Oh, please no. Oh, not me. Back up all the words that came up. But when you get done, literally, this is how you feel. I wouldn't, again, have believed this had I not gone through this. But you feel euphoric when you're done. The feeling is so overwhelming. It's almost like, oh my gosh, it's like a flood of endorphins. It's incredible. And you feel so motivated. You feel so, you feel like, wow, I could do anything today. It has this confidence building kind of effect, self-efficacy growth in you as a person after you do it. All right. So what's going on here? Brain is predicting absolute awfulness. You do the hard thing. You come out of the experience with complete bliss and joy. Like, what is going on here? I had to understand the psychology of this because it's so intriguing and so interesting. Everything we want in life lies on the other side of discomfort. Again, I wish this weren't true. I truly do wish it weren't true, but it tends to hold true. Good relationships, right? Whether that's, a primary relationship with a partner or spouse, or whether that's, good familial relationships, typically those include lots of difficult conversations, including working through the hard stuff. John Gottman John Gottman has shown basically it's not how we deal with the good times, it's how we deal with the conflicts, actually, that predicts marital satisfaction or partner satisfaction. Work success, right? So work success typically, if you ask anybody who's being successful at their job, much of it is pretty difficult. It's pretty uncomfortable, monotonous even, right? Earlier on in our lives, academic success, right? Pushing through those difficult study periods and the good grades and whatever in order to advance in that very delayed gratification kind of system. Good habits, same thing. Right? Anybody love the gym? I know you're out there. But anybody like have like a mixed relationship with the gym? Like you love it, hate it, kind of a thing? Yeah. Yeah, it's because it's a lot of work, right? It's very uncomfortable. It hurts, et cetera, et cetera. So go on and on. Leadership, same thing. Leadership is just a series of uncomfortable conversations, hard conversations, typically. So again, this bridge of discomfort, this emotional skill of getting better at doing hard things is key to most of the things we want in life. So how do we get better at it? What is this emotional skill set we're talking about? Just very fascinating concept that scientists have, the name of it, always is a technical term in scientific literature. It's called hormesis. Hormesis, kind of a weird word. And what it refers to is the adaptive response of biological systems to moderate, we could think lessen the degree of pain or lessen the discomfort, right? Environmental or self-imposed challenges through which the system improves its functionality and or tolerance to more severe challenges. In other words, without all these sort of technical speak, micro stress creates resilience. Little bits of challenge are good for us. Too much overwhelms us. Too little also, when put in conditions of difficulty or challenge, overwhelms us because we don't feel like we have the requisite skills or competencies to actually overcome them. So either way, we're ill-equipped to handle life's challenges. Hormesis, which is this idea of these sort of mini challenges or micro challenges, is the proper dose, I guess, of stress or challenge that tends to strengthen a system, a biological system. So here's what the evidence shows when it comes to hormesis. Extreme temperatures. So there's just some of the benefits. Some of them are health benefits, some of them are psychological benefits, some of them are memory and other types of benefits, aging benefits, but just as a quick sampling. Extreme temperatures, which I've been experimenting with this last month, boosts your immune system. We know this. Actually, my entire family had this really pretty bad virus that went through our house. I have 2 kids. And during this little experiment, I was the only one who didn't get sick. I caught the virus, quite clear that I caught the virus, and it just hung on this little, I noticed it. Well, I didn't notice it, but I didn't actually get sick, like have to take time off work. My immune system basically took care of it. So we know it boosts immune system, strength. Caloric restriction, which again, I really don't like that this is true. This is everything from intermittent fasting to other types of caloric restriction, extends the lifespan. There's David Sinclair and others research on this. Exercise, right, which is a form of physical exertion and mental, whether it's cardiovascular or strength building, improves mood, builds muscle, and activates neurogenesis. Neurogenesis is the growth of new neurons in the brain. Mental struggle while learning leads to better memory. So if the experience of learning isn't mentally effortful, you're going to remember less. So mental struggle is an indicator that it's going to stick better. In fact, with adults, actually, most scientists believe that a precondition for adult neuroplasticity is mental effort. So if it doesn't feel effortful or there's like a bit of a mental struggle, you probably haven't activated neuroplasticity or your brain's ability to get into that receptive changing state the way kids' brains are naturally. Exposure to fears, we'll talk about this in a bit, reduces their impact. So they call this habituation, decreases the intensity of the emotion over time. So hormesis is this idea that little doses of difficulty, discomfort, or stress tend to make us stronger when done skillfully. All right, so we're going to talk about a few studies here. This is a really great study that was done at the University of Chicago, Nicholas Epley and colleagues. Here's what happened. They brought people into the lab, and they said, "Okay, we want you to go onto a bus." Well, Nicholas Epley, just to set this up, Nicholas Epley was looking around one day on a bus that he was on, and he was noticing what everybody was doing on the bus, which, no surprise, looks about like what you're looking at right here, right? Everybody's on their devices. And yet, Nicholas Epley knows from the research that initiating conversation, talking with other people, is one of the deepest forms of well-being and happiness. So here on a bus, everybody has, like, it's literally sitting next to them, possible beacons of joy and happiness if they would just activate the conversation, but nobody's doing it. This was the impetus for the study. So brings all these people into the lab, and he says, "Okay, we want you to go onto a public bus here in Chicago, and we want you to initiate a conversation with a stranger. This might feel a little bit awkward, might be a little bit difficult, but it's part of the study, and we just want to see how it goes. But before you do that, we just want to ask you how you think it's going to go." Here were their responses. This is going to be awkward. Awkward was actually the most common word. This is going to be uncomfortable. This is going to be, I'm going to feel nervous. I'm going to get sweaty palms. Like, I'm going to be interrupting this person. They probably have some deadline. They're trying to get something out. They're going to be bugged by me. You know, there's all this negative emotion associated with initiating conversation. Again, remember my brain and your brain before jumping into the water. Remember what it's predicting. Dread. This is going to be awful. This is going to be terrible. Right? All right. So they have these people get onto buses, and they have a researcher with them who sits in the back and just observes, right? Make sure everything goes well. They do, in fact, strike up this conversation with a stranger. So this person who's part of the study, you know, talks to the other person, starts, you know, saying, "Oh, hey, where are you headed to?" You know, this kind of a thing. They, you know, for the time they're together, have the conversation, whatever. And then at some point, the participant gets off. Some designated point, the participant gets off. As well as does the first researcher. There's actually another one on the bus. There's two. So they get off. First researcher gets off the bus with the participant and immediately asks, you know, a series of questions, tries to gauge their emotional state. Says, "How'd it go?" Any guesses? After doing the hard thing, how they experienced or what they reported back, how the experience was? Danae's like, yeah, they were elated. They were like, "Oh my gosh, I had so much fun. We talked about, like, we have so many common interests. I had no idea. They live right by me. I've never met them. They live around the corner. Like, we exchanged numbers. We're going to go to lunch next week." Like, it was just like social fireworks. Like, it was such a great experience. And then the second researcher, who I forgot to mention, was also on the bus, actually walked up to the stranger, sat next to them, and said, "Hi, my name's so-and-so from the University of Chicago. You've just been a part of a study that we're running on you know, initiating conversation with a stranger. I just have a couple questions. Would you be willing to answer them?" And they asked the exact same questions. "How was that experience for you?" And the stranger, same thing. "Oh my gosh, it was so fun. We had so much in common. We both have 2 kids, da, 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 da. We both had," you know, it was just like all this joy and positive emotion. All right. I want you to hold that, because the exact same thing happened. Brain predicts this is going to be bad. On the other end of doing the difficult thing, one was physical, this one is social. Yeah. The experience is joy, positivity, connection, happiness. It's a brain prediction error. Prediction error is what scientists would call this. And it matters enormously because we live our lives acting like our brains are telling us the truth. when in fact, they're predicting incorrectly what's going to bring happiness, sense of fulfillment, sense of confidence, sense of joy into our lives. All right. Got to tell you about another study. Oh, no, sorry, that will come in a sec. Most of us, our brain will serve up this solution for where happiness comes from. And our brain will tell us our happiness is to be found in this beautiful circle. I know you're all familiar with it. I am. Called your comfort zone. Right? Happiness is what comes easy. It's the good life is the comfortable life, right? I mean, you're all, somebody from Los Angeles or Orange County and thereabouts in Southern California. Like, I'm just thinking of like a day on the beach with 78-degree weather and just like it's like comfort, right? I'm not thinking of traffic, by the way, or any of those other, things. I'm just thinking of the good parts of California. So again, it's not to say these things aren't good or good for us. They are. It's just to say that's an incomplete picture of what makes humans thrive. It's an incomplete picture of what makes humans thrive. And if we spend most of our life there, it tends to diminish our happiness, tends to diminish our social relationships, and tends to diminish our potential and our confidence. Now, when we move outside of our comfort zone and get a little bit uncomfortable, what ends up happening is this is an indicator, not that we should get back to the comfort zone, which is what our brain is actually telling us to do, but I want you to reframe that. This is an indicator that you're in the strike zone. Or a client, right? That client is in a strike zone. If they're getting, again, not overwhelmingly uncomfortable, but, like on a 4 to 6 on a 1 to 10 scale, uncomfortable, something like that, then they're probably in the strike zone. Attention is heightened, neuroplasticity kicks on. There's this sort of nervous energy a little bit with those types of settings. And you feel competent enough probably to do it, although you're not quite at ease with it. All right, you're in a growth zone. You're in a growth zone. Again, biologically, there's lots of really interesting science about why this happens, but we can't actually grow in states of comfort. We grow in states of discomfort. Think of the way habits form. Think of moving into a new location or learning any new skill. It's a lot of mental energy, right? It's a lot of difficulty, exertion, until it becomes easy over time, right? But anytime, let me think of another example. Somebody in a workplace setting who's taking on a new job responsibility, right? Inevitably, they're going to feel out of their depth when they make that move. But if they don't make that move, they'll just be stuck with the same skill set and the same types of job descriptions or job responsibilities they've always had. So discomfort is actually a necessary condition for growth. It's not really optional. And when we see it as, oh, that means I'm growing, rather than that means I should retreat, it changes the way we relate to the feeling of discomfort. All right. Now, can one take this too far? Yes. Yes. Well, let me give you a quick example. On the polar plunge that I was doing in February, I learned a few things. One was don't go in too quickly. On day 1, 2, and 3, I went in too quickly, and I panicked. I had that panicky feeling. I went in all the way to my neck, and I had that kind of feeling, and I just wanted to get out of there. Over time, I slowly learned to go in more slowly, to let the stress response, calm down, and then slowly go as deep as my neck. That feeling or sense of control when doing something difficult, that you're in control of the process, really matters. If you feel like it's being done to you, you're being forced to do it, you'll tend to flip into a panic zone. This is true for your clients, for everyone. So it really matters that choice and control are part of this equation, and that people don't get pushed farther than they themselves are willing or wanting to go. All right, so I want you to think about this as the Goldilocks zone. It's not too cold. It's not too hot. It's just right. Discomfort, that's just enough to say you're growing, not panicking, but you're also not staying still in the comfort zone. Discomfort is really the price of growth. Another way to think about this is to the extent that growth has a ticket attached to it or a price, something that it costs me, it's emotional discomfort. And so if I want to get into the amusement park of growth, that path, which is really exciting, it's a really exciting place to be, there's an entry cost, and it's the emotion of discomfort. But again, it matters what kind of discomfort. So the three things that I think really matter, it's discomfort, choosing discomfort on a pretty regular basis, ideally daily, that's freely chosen, that I'm the one in the driver's seat of what I'm choosing to do that's uncomfortable versus not, in the service of growth. So again, this isn't arbitrary discomfort or suffering. It's not gratuitous. It's not for no purpose other than to say, oh, I'm tough or something. That's not actually what we're talking about. What we're talking really about is in the service of some bigger goal of personal growth or development. That's when it tends to be meaningful or productive. Sometimes we'll say discomfort. All right, so I want you to think about, we try to go to the gym every day, do our exercises, get our little bit of, muscle work in, a little heart beating a little faster. I want you to think about the same thing, but with emotions, right? Am I going to the emotional discomfort gym? Did I get my daily dose of emotional discomfort today? Because if I did, that means I'm kind of in the strike zone. I'm not staying still. I'm progressing in my life in some way. And the discomfort is an indicator, a clue that that's happening. All right, I'm going to share with you another study. This is a study done by Timothy Wilson. Timothy Wilson, really interesting psychologist at University of Virginia, brought people into a blank room, just like what you're seeing here. And he wanted to see how they handled it. Psychologists are always coming up with crazy scenarios, aren't they? And he had these different conditions to the study. Yeah, he would stick them in a room and just watch them for 15 minutes and see what they did in states of boredom. Right. So really the emotion they're looking at is kind of boredom, the aversiveness, the difficulty of boredom. And in one condition, they ended up bringing in a little box that had a button on it. And the participants were told this beforehand. If you touch the button, it will shock you. Right? So we'll be back in 15 minutes. You can do whatever you want. All right. I still can't believe these numbers. 67% of men chose to shock themselves instead of just be with their own thoughts and be bored. What? So think of the juxtaposition there. I'd rather physically inflict, and many of them did it multiple times. So think of choosing to inflict pain on myself rather than deal with the pain of not having a phone or however we distract ourselves, right? When we're bored, with our own thoughts. That's pretty shocking. And with women, the percentage, I believe, was 25%. So women were quite a bit lower. But still had a decent portion of participants who did this. All right. So again, the discomfort, dealing with discomfort, and there's lots of flavors of discomfort, boredom being one of them. We've collectively, one might argue, we've collectively atrophied on this, partly because we do have things that are very easy to entertain us all the time, sitting in our pockets, right? So how do we get better at discomfort? How do we improve again? Because again, if discomfort is an indicator of growth, that I'm on a growth path, how do we get better at the emotions that naturally come up and that are aversive or difficult? How do we actually get more skilled at this thing? Again, think about initiating conversation with a stranger. How would I get better at this? Maybe I'm an introvert. Maybe I don't like doing that. Causes all this internal emotional friction, right? How do we actually get better at this? All right. Well, again, back to the my experience with the polar plunging. This is what time one basically looked like for me, right? So the emotional intensity of it was super high. The tail on the emotional intensity, it did come down eventually. But the emotional aversive emotion, the apprehension, the anxiety, the nervousness, the avoiding, oh my gosh, the procrastination, right? When it comes to hard things, all because of difficult emotion. We're avoiding the difficult emotion naturally. But how do we get better at that? Well, with the talking to a bus, a stranger on a bus question, if you start doing that, maybe you commute every day, and maybe you make a point of it to just sit down next to somebody, assuming it's not like overly awkward because the bus is like basically empty except for one person. Maybe it's like, there's one person in every seat kind of a thing, and you kind of know that, right? You go make it a point to find someone to sit next to, and not just sit next to them, but actually strike up a conversation for discomfort practice. Oh, I'm going to the emotional discomfort gym. Perfect opportunity. All right, so on day one, this is what it's going to look like. On day 2 or 3, it's going to get a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit easier. Day 4 and 5, it's going to look something more like this. Day 8 and 9, it's going to get a little bit easier. Day 14 and 15. Oh man, this was like not that, it's something there. Like I feel this little bit of, upward kind of feeling of anxiety, but it's relative to what it started at. It's nearly gone. It's nearly gone. Now, again, if I hadn't done this with the polar plunges, I wouldn't believe this, or it would just be like an idea, right? Like a concept. But when you do this, this is called habituation, right? So the brain naturally lowers the emotional intensity of things we do a lot of. It's also the essence of where confidence comes from. So the more I do something, the less anxiety I feel, the more normal it feels, the more natural it feels, the more kind of no big deal it feels, the more confidence I can do that particular thing with over time. But there's only one way to build that, and it's by daily doing. It's by daily doing. So I started with the cold plunges. Guess what I'm doing now? It's one of the things I hate. I really do hate the very most. I'm making one cold sales call every day for my business. I hate cold calls so much. And I'm like, oh, well, that's definitely the one I need to work on then. And what I'm trying to do, right, is take the process of cold calling and make it normal, to make my brain react to it less. Like, oh, it's just one more thing on my to-do list. Man, what's the big deal? That's what I want to get to. I'm not there yet, but I'm working through, I'm building the emotional tolerance of the difficult thing, and over time changing my relationship to it, right? Scientists have a special word for this. It's called distress tolerance. Distress tolerance. So distress tolerance is how skilled I'm becoming at holding an aversive or difficult emotion without running away from it, or avoiding it, or procrastinating because of it. How good am I getting at holding space for a difficult emotion and working through it, making the sales call anyway, taking the polar plunge anyway, initiating the conversation with a stranger anyway, whatever the thing is that's hard for you, right? Again, daily practice is really the gold standard. That's the ideal because that repetition really matters. I'm tending to do these 30-day challenges on a Monday through Friday schedule because weekends I've got family and it's a little crazy to do it every day. But Monday through Friday, I do every day that I have, a fair amount of control on my schedule with my workday. And again, over time, this is the goal that I'm trying to build is an increased ability to manage stress, to hold difficult emotions and not run away from them, but to embrace them. All right. So the main goal here, or the main challenge, is that your brain actually is not wired to do this. Your brain, when difficult emotions come up, your brain's like, what are we talking about? Like, get out of there. Doesn't it? Is it when using like a social emotion like awkwardness, isn't the natural thing to be like, think of a gathering where you don't really know anyone. Maybe it's a conference, maybe it's some, gala or something, some event, or maybe maybe someone said you should go for networking reasons, but you don't know anybody. Think of how hard it is to just navigate that space. Your brain is like, no, seriously, just like go surf your phone. It's so much better. That's the solution that's going to serve up to us over and over and over again. We're hardwired to avoid discomfort, right? This is the challenge with growth, is that by avoiding the discomfort, we then, of course, don't embrace opportunities that are there for our growth. So the real challenge here is how do we get from avoiding discomfort as a default setting to embracing discomfort? How do we override the avoidance response and get to a place where we lean into discomfort? We see discomfort as an indicator of growth, and therefore we're like, ooh, something's coming up in me. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, I'm here. We're going to get into feedback in a handful of other situations in just a sec, because those are the kinds of things that tend to be pretty difficult for most of us. And it's like, oh, how do I hear that emotion or listen to that emotion and hear that as like an invitation to lean in rather than a signal that I should back out? That's what we're trying to train our brains and our clients' brains to do, right? Because again, in the service of growth, this is what the emotional skill that tends to matter. Now, we've been talking mostly to this point about the discomfort half of the equation, right? And how that's related to growth. But of course, brains are not so simple. Because of this problem inherent to your brain wanting to avoid discomfort, there is a more skillful way to relate to and embrace discomfort. It isn't just about grit or again, I overdid it. I panicked actually when I started that polar plunge thing. I wasn't in the beginning doing it skillfully. I did too much too soon. And I wasn't really adding any ingredients that were helping my brain have a sustainable relationship with discomfort. Over time, I was like, and I see this, by the way, all the time, just to be very clear about the danger here. I don't like when, like, I say this, when I talk about the cold water thing, sometimes people will get excited about it. And then they'll be like, yeah, I'm just going to like do cold. I'm gonna do my whole shower cold, the whole thing, like all at once, all the time. And they'll do it and it'll work for like a week or two. And then they're like bail on it. Not sustainable, right? Too much discomfort. Brain is actually like the brain's discomfort, like avoid discomfort thing actually wins over. And it's like, no, that's a bad idea. Or the gym, which is like, oh my gosh, this year is going to be my year to finally get that washboard stomach. I mean, sorry guys, I'm 42. That sounds like a pipe dream of my 20s, but you know what I'm saying? Like whatever the dream is, it's like, or whatever it is, we tend to go so big and then we like hit it with so much energy and it's so much pain that your brain's like, 2 to 4 weeks, you're like unsustainable. All right. So what do we need to actually change, to do this skillfully, not in this sort of tough way or like this grit way or this sort of white knuckle. It's not about that. It's about skillfully navigating these waters in ways that actually make the relationship to discomfort and therefore growth actually sustainable. And one of the most things that matters most to your brain is this. Is just a little dollop of fun. A little bit of joy, a little bit of excitement, a little bit of smiles, a little bit of confetti. Why not? You know? But the point is, when you skillfully add enjoyment, other people, reframing, we'll get into these in a bit, it tends to change the way we experience discomfort. It's easier just to say it all as one word instead of fun and discomfort or fun and uncomfortable. Just put it all together. It's time to get Funcomfortable, people, right? It's time to get Funcomfortable. All right, quick example. How do you make discomfort fun? Again, I have 2 kids, 9 and 3. And like any parent, I'm trying to get more greens into their body. You know, greens have a bit of a bitter taste. I drink this drink every morning. It's called Athletic Greens. Some of you have probably heard of it. And, you know, it tastes about as good as lawn shavings. It's really nothing special. But I know it's really good for me. And I know it's really good for my kids if they just drink it. You know, a lot of discomfort involved. That kind of thing, right? Well, one day, this was a couple months ago, I was like, okay, I think I'm doing this wrong. I gotta do this differently. And I was like, what could I do to make this more exciting for the kids? I was like, because every day, by the way, I put this in front of them, just a little bit, not a big, huge thing like this, but like just a little bit of mine, just in a little cup in front of them. And they usually just push it away. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this differently today. So I walk over to the table and I say, hey guys, how's it going? How's it going? And I'm like, all right. So have you guys ever heard of the biggest green mustache game? And my 9-year-old's like, you know, she's like half like asleep still, like shaking out, like, what, Dad? And my 2, he was then 2, now he's now 3. 2-year-old, he's like, you know, looking like, what's the, you know, he's barely even catching what I'm even saying. And I'm like, no, serious. The biggest green mustache wins. And they were like, oh. And they start looking down at the drink. And I've got my drink in my hand. And I'm like, all right, guys, who's ready? And they get this big look in their eyes like, ooh, it's on. So I get mine and I get it. And I get this big, juicy green mustache, you know? And I say, try to beat that. And then my 9-year-old is like, all right, Dad, it's on. And so, of course, look at that. She's the artist. So of course, it looks like Salvador Dali or something. I mean, like, look at that mustache. I mean, it's like, it's got definition lines, right? And she's like, has this, you know? And then my 2-year-old is like, well, gosh, guys, I'm going for the whole goatee. And no kidding, you guys, no kidding. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even a suggestion that they drink it. It was just, let's play a game. And I look down at their cups and it's gone. Right? Discomfort, fun. We put them together. It changes the way the brain relates to the very same activity. Activity didn't change. Get the stuff down the hatch. That's the goal. But the emotional response or emotional relationship to that same activity dramatically changed. Dramatically changed by adding one simple ingredient of fun. Why does this matter? There's this part of your brain right underneath your eyes, right above your eye. It's called your orbitofrontal cortex. Orbitofrontal cortex. And there's this really fascinating thing the orbital frontal cortex does, and it keeps track of how rewarding things are in your day. Right? So activities that are low, that aren't very exciting, it's further down on the priority, or you can think of it like a reward hierarchy, like a ladder. They're further down on the ladder, so your brain's not going to want to repeat them, right? It's kind of like an upside down stoplight. So things at the top of the ladder, your brain's like, wow, I really like those things. Things at the bottom of the ladder, brain's like, I could do without, right? So again, more rewarding toward the top, middle, and lowest. But the thing that's most important is that the higher you go on the ladder, the more your brain believes this thing is worth repeating. And the lower you go, your brain's like, yeah, I wouldn't like to eat broccoli again. That stuff's pretty bitter. Right? All right, let me give you a quick example. I in 2019, I never really considered myself a runner because I never really ran. But in 2019, that started changing. And because my natural relationship with running is roughly like this. Like if you just ask me, James, how do you like running? I'd be like, well, it's like, it's pretty low on the reward hierarchy. My orbitofrontal cortex registers it as like, yeah, mildly painful, sometimes very painful. But I started doing this a little bit more. And one of the things I started doing is I started doing it more creatively. So I started running occasionally with other people, right? So one of these people that I run with, his name is Johnny. He's a neighbor. He lives 2 doors down from me. And Johnny and I go running, and the experience is somehow different when I run with Johnny. We do the same activity. We just move our legs and get our hearts beating. And it still kind of hurts, but it's better. We're having a nice conversation. I'm not as focused on the pain. I'm building this relationship with somebody who's a neighbor and a friend that we'd like to get to know better. Like it has all this social reward that's tied to it. So when I go running with Johnny, it's a little bit better. It's not like fireworks, top of the world, but it is better than it was before. Now, my favorite person in the world is my wife. And a couple of years back, we decided to run one of these Color Me Rad races. Have you ever, these 5Ks where they like sprinkle like dust and through all these colors or whatever? And there's like music blaring. It's just like a big party. It's just a party where people are also running, no kidding. Like we did it, and I'm quite certain we ran a 5K, but all I remember is the party. Same activity, it was very different experience of it being laid down in memory, and therefore much more likely to want to be repeated over time. So again, when I talk about skillfully relating to doing hard things, it's the more positive emotion we fuse with that difficult thing, the more likely we are to actually want to do it again. By the way, this is root cause for why we don't stick to habits. How emotionally rewarding it is matters much more than we tend to suspect. All right, so how do you actually make things fun, enjoyable, that you'll want to repeat them? All right, we've hinted at this already, but one is fun fusing. Right? One is fun fusing. Scientists sometimes call this pairing. Doesn't matter what you call it, right? But the basic idea is I'm going to take something that's uncomfortable and I'm going to join it or connect it with something that I actually like, that's actually fun. And I'm going to do that intentionally, not by accident. I'm going to make that part of my strategy for sticking to the hard thing. A couple examples. Exercise. Again, it's hard. Just the physical exertion of it, the energy expenditure. Your body is going to create signals of pain and discomfort, basically to get you to stop spending energy, because energy is the most valuable resource your body has, and your brain's primary job is to conserve it. And so what your brain really wants you to do is stop doing that thing that's spending so much energy, and it's going to protest the whole time through pain. That's why it feels painful. But if you add a little something, like a little Netflix series, it gets better. It gets better. It just does. It's like sometimes a lot better. Like sometimes you're like doing push-ups and you're like, oh, how many? I lost count. I don't even know how many I was doing. Right? It's like, I love this series. There's so much drama involved. Your attention is all over here, yet you're doing this, doing the reps. Yeah. So exercise is a very, very easy example. Okay. Other life chores, let's call them that. less growth sort of, I guess, involved in this one, and a little more just get it done kind of a thing, right? Dishes though. I hate dishes, but that's one of my, like, my wife and I, we divide up the house responsibilities, and dishes, dishes always. Dishes are in the sink, it's my fault. Like, we're all clear on that. But sometimes late at night, I'm feeling a little lonely. And it's it's hard. The kids are in bed. It's like the whole thing with young kids, right? And it's like 10:30, maybe 11 even, and the kitchen's still a mess. And I come downstairs and we fell asleep and we're half, because with the kids and you're reading, and like we all pass out on the bed, and like suddenly we like drag ourselves back down, and it's like, oh shoot, the dishes. And not every time, but often I'll be like, hey love, would you just come sit with me while I do the dishes? And not every time she says yes, but occasionally she'd be like, yeah, sure. And then we have this nice conversation, chatting about the day and kids and what's on our mind, and trying to process through how the day went. And the dishes fly by. The difference with doing the dishes when in conversation versus alone is like wildly just obnoxious, and it's just painful. It's no fun. When I'm doing it with somebody I'm having a nice conversation with, who I love deeply, different experience. Now, again, if my wife's not up for it, or is just not having it, or whatever, I'm like, well, who else can I call? Dad? My brother Jake? My friend Mark? Like, I often ask people when I'm working with a client and I'm trying, and it's very clear that there's a social support that's needed as part of their growth journey. And they'll say things like, I just don't have time, to build relationships. It just takes so much time. I'll often ask them, do you do the dishes? And they'll be like, what? Yeah, but what do you mean? Doesn't have to do anything to do with anything. And I was like, well, could you call someone while you're doing the dishes? And they're like, oh, I guess I've never thought about it. Right? We have these dead times. Driving dishes and laundry are usually the three biggest. We have these dead times. We see those things as useless or painful, right? Make a phone call. Do it with somebody else. And I swear to you, it will feel like this. It's so much better. It's so much better. All right. Another example, email. So again, anybody out there just loves email? I mean, come on, it's a joy. I love email. Like every time I open my inbox, it's like just this like feeling of joy, right? No, of course not. It's like an awful thing. It's dread. It's just like a monotonous thing we all have to do, and just because it's part of business and whatever, right? All right. So most people just do their emails in their offices or in their home offices. But sometimes we need a change of scenery. Yeah. What if you were to go outside? And I know California is the kind of place where you can do this. What if you just went outside and knocked out your emails with your hotspot on the beach rather than, or at a cafe rather than in your boring office? Different emotional experience, right? Fun fusing, putting two things, discomfort and fun, together and changing the emotional relationship to those things. All right, so this feels very different than doing it in your office. And every time when I feel this urge to procrastinate, I'm like, can I change the environment? Can I change the environment? Because if I can change the environment, I usually can change my emotional state. If I can change my emotional state, I'll get over the procrastination. Right? I can't change the emotion directly often, but I can change my environment, which then changes the emotion. All right. So again, this is what most of us do with work email. It's just like slogging away. And that's what we just have to think. We just have to burrow through the pain, But again, and which, leaves us about there on the reward hierarchy. But with going outside, it's a different game. It's more rewarding for your brain to do things in natural environments than in enclosed spaces. All right. We're going to take 1 minute to write down something you're procrastinating. And one fun thing you could pair it with. So feel free to go grab a pencil. You could also do this on your device or laptop. 1 minute to write down something you're procrastinating, avoiding, something you'd like to get done, but just simply put off. We all have this, by the way. And one thing, fun thing you can pair with it. All right, everybody ready? We're going to have a little timer here, and then we'll just have a little debrief share. And feel free to take off your video as well, if it helps. All right. Now, again, just to remind everybody, everyone has something they procrastinate on. You are universally, we're all in the same boat on this. So is there anyone with that spirit that would like to share something they're procrastinating? And then one thing fun thing you'd like to try out with that thing you avoid? Just feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself. That's fine too.
I'll share.
Please.
Well, I actually implemented this because I am not a fan of doing my bills because it involves numbers, which I'm not necessarily the greatest at, but it just takes a long time for me because I don't have like a fancy system in place. So I do this when it's quiet in my house and I put on a movie that I know by heart and I just have that run in the background. And so if I know there's a funny part, then I can pause, but it just gets me in, I don't know, just having something in the background that I know is funny because I already memorized it in my head. I don't have to sit and watch it. Gets me through like doing the bills.
Good. Is your name Donnie or Danny?
Danny.
Danny?
Like the female version of Danny, like Danny boy. I'm a Danny girl.
Good. I so appreciate that. Yeah, humor and funny, something that's funny, comedic, that's enjoyable, that really gets us laughing every time will tend to increase that. We underestimate the value of that. We think of that as a diversion when really it's like a psychological tool to help us push through difficult things. So thank you. Yes. Anybody else? Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, I need to clean up my basement, and I was just thinking about what music I could put on Spotify. I was also trying to think, who could I get to join me? I can't think of who would want to join me for that, but that's where my mind is going.
I love it, Rob. Thank you. Yeah, other people, obvious go-to. Such a big help, but music as well. Just such an quick and easy go-to, or some kind of other media like a movie or a Netflix series or something. Music is, of course, less mentally or cognitively involved than watching something. Anybody else? Tax prep, Brenda says, pair with listening to uplifting music, Mozart or musical soundtrack. Good. Podcast, Daddy says, yeah. Anybody else? Maybe one more share.
I have some paperwork that like forms I need to fill out and submit for mentor coaching things. And I've been procrastinating on that. And so I thought, I like the idea somebody just shared to set a timer. So I know that's not fun, but at least it puts my mind in a set that, okay, I'm only going to do this for X amount of time. And then maybe putting some music on to do it too.
Yeah, I lost it right at the end there, but setting a timer is what I heard.
Yeah, setting the timer and then music.
Yeah. Wonderful. Good. Good. I want you to thank you so much for that, Nenner. Keep incubating on this pairing idea, because again, once it clicks on, it's like, oh, what could I do to join with the hard thing? What enjoyment, what positive emotion, whether that's fun or joy or another person, in order to actually make this either more bearable or actually kind of enjoyable? That's, I think, question number one. All right, number two, fun framing. Fun framing, which again, most of our work as coaches is about reframing, right? Cognitive reappraisal is what the scientists refer to this as. But reframing really matters. And the way we think about these things tends to matter quite a bit. The reason why is because scientists have discovered that feelings follow the frame we put around them. Let me just share a quick example. So again, we have an event happens, something happens. Usually it's bad. If it's a negative emotion, the kind we tend to like think about, a strong emotion that's hard to manage. It's usually a negative event that's happened, or an event that we're not, I guess, thrilled about. But then we frame that as, oh, this is a catastrophe, or this is a, oh, they're going to set me back. Oh no, really seriously today, like the, oh no frame, right? Or whatever the frame is. And then the feeling flows from that frame. Let me give you a quick example of how this works. This is, again, he's now 3, Eon is his name. So this is this past October. He's just getting to that age where holidays are like the thing, right? It's a big deal. He was so into been so into the holidays this year. So he's super into Halloween. And he developed this really sweet relationship with a pumpkin this year. It was about that size. So it was just the right size for him. He would carry it around with him. He would actually, we'd be up reading stories and be like, I want my pumpkin. He wanted to sleep with it. Like he would sleep with a snug, like a bear or something. It was like, it's like a member of the family practically. And one morning I'm making breakfast and I'm doing the morning routine, I'm cooking some eggs, and I had seen that the pumpkin was on his high chair. Because that's where it is with him, for this period of a handful of weeks in October. And I hear this really awful sound, which is a thud. And I'm to my back, right? So I can't see it, but I'm like, oh no. Because I was putting the pieces together and was like, oh. And I turn around, and sure enough, the pumpkin is under the high chair, sitting in 2 pieces. It's cracked in half. His best little Halloween friend. And this happened so fast. I don't even know how this even occurred to me. It was like lightning, just like struck my brain. And I run over and I grab the pumpkin and I hold it up to him because I'm just waiting for this wail, this scream from this 2-year-old. And I hold it up for him and I say, oh my gosh, buddy, you're never going to believe this. We got one of the special ones, the kind that open up on the week of Halloween. Your pumpkin, it opened up. And he was like, he's putting all these pieces together like, wait, there's special pumpkins? Like, we got a special pumpkin? And he grabs it and goes, oh, and literally thought this was the greatest thing that had ever happened to him, that we bought one of the special pumpkins that opened up the week of Halloween. It was like 3 days before Halloween. And I'm like, I can't believe that just happened. However, what matters so much about it is it illustrates perfectly this principle. I reframed the scenario. I gave it a different interpretation, not like, oh, disaster just struck, but whoa, we just got like it's almost like the universe chose us to be the special pumpkin, like, I don't know, but it's something cool. The special pumpkin people that have to care for this really special pumpkin that opens up the week of Halloween. And suddenly he had a completely different emotion than he would have had if he had framed it himself. Now, again, this happens over and over and over again, and we have the same kind of relationship with discomfort. Typically, when something's awkward, or we're getting feedback from a colleague, and we're like, heart rate starts going up, palms start getting sweaty, or we have to give feedback, and we're like, it's that awkward, hard, and we're like stuttering the words out. Like, we assume those emotions are there, I don't know, to just give us misery. I don't know, but the frame is like something bad is happening. What if we've got it exactly backwards? There's a couple of scientists, Caitlin Woolley and Elliot Fishbach, who wrote this really, really brilliant paper called Motivating Personal Growth by Seeking Discomfort. And what they're arguing is that if you start labeling discomfort as an indicator, as a clue, as a, oh my gosh, growth is on the table, it changes the way you relate to the emotion. And it changes the trajectory of how you manage the difficult emotion. It actually changes physically in you, the way we know that mindset interventions do. It changes the trajectory from then on out. Because at that point, maybe the difficult emotion, we'll give another example. Maybe it's that you're having, a talk you're giving or something. And the difficult emotion is, oh, shoot, like big room, 100 people. I hope I don't blow it. That's like a threat interpretation of what's about to happen, right? But what if all that energy is there to support you? What if all that adrenaline and cortisol, all that like fuel, if you interpret that as like, oh my gosh, this is my body preparing me, do something awesome, something I genuinely care about. I wouldn't feel this way if I didn't. Those are signals that I care about this, that I'm going to nail it. And this is going to be exciting, right? This is excitement. My body's getting excited for this big moment. Changes the downstream consequences, the downstream feelings. Literally more blood runs to our brain when we reinterpret it that way. So we then think more clearly. We then have more, cognitive flexibility with the audience, and it tends to go better. The frame matters enormously. And when we interpret discomfort as an indicator that we're in the growth sweet spot, then suddenly it's like, oh, I want to lean into that growth sweet spot. I don't want to run away from it, right? Over and over and over again, this happens. By the way, this is what it looks like. Sorry, forgot I had that picture on there. All right. One of my favorite frames when it comes to reframing is the game frame. All right, so the game frame is just how do we turn this into a bit of a game? Even the feeling of discomfort. Let me just tell you one thing I've been doing over the last 4 or 5 months. I've been keeping track of my DQ. I'm not talking about Dairy Queen here. I'm talking about my discomfort quotient, my daily DQ score. Like, how am I doing on entering into situations of discomfort? And how's that, just tracking it, just actually keeping track of it like a little game. And so what I've started doing is keeping track of how many times I embrace discomfort. And then I divide that by how many times I experienced discomfort. And that gives me this nice little number. It's a percentage, 75%, 60%, 41%, depends on the day, on my DQ score. Now, what happens is really weird. And by the way, I track this on a little app called Tally. Tally is just a very simple tracking app. So let's imagine that I embraced discomfort 4 times, but I experienced it 7. So I avoided it 3 times, right? My daily DQ that day would be 4 out of 7, which would be a percentage of 57%. That's my daily DQ score for the day, right? Suddenly we're playing a game. I mean, yeah, it's not Mario Kart, but it's like a game. And it's more interesting because of that. Let me just, again, I mentioned my wife, Shaylin, who, on a normal day, this is where she is. I love her to pieces. She's brilliant. She's amazing. She's the best life partner one could ask for. And then there are these moments, as all relationships have, where she wants to give me, some candid feedback. And when that happens, there's something weird that happens in my brain, which is like suddenly like the place that how rewarding the experience of hanging out together like went down, when she's like, I need to give you some feedback on that. But now that I've started playing this game, my DQ game, and she wants to give me feedback, which again, all healthy relationships should have that give and take like that. I'm like, oh, wait, this is the thing I'm working on. This is like the awkward or hard emotion that brings up is like, oh, wait. Okay, I'm listening. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize I did that. Suddenly I'm less defensive. I'm more inclined, I don't do this perfectly. It's very hard to take full responsibility in every situation, but I'm much more inclined to take responsibility for my actions and to just apologize. Be like, yeah, I'm really sorry. Sorry I did that. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. I turned the discomfort into a game, and that changed how receptive I was to hearing feedback. See how that works? It's incredible how powerful this is, and we woefully underestimate that. We just assume feedback's feedback, and it's just always hard. Yes, it is hard. It's not that situation is necessarily easy, but suddenly it becomes like an opportunity for growth, which feels very different than a criticism, right? All right. So I want you to think about this. When was the last time you got feedback? We're not actually going to do this exercise. We're just going to kind of give the architecture of the exercise. If you'd like to do this after the session, please do. But when is the last time you got feedback? And then I want you to think about, we're going to go past that. One way to turn that feedback process into a game. I don't care if you imagine the person giving you feedback have googly eyes that are popping out. I don't care what it is. I just want you to start being playful when in experiences of giving or receiving feedback, that you start turning into game. Maybe it is this discomfort quotient thing where you actually start tracking how often you embrace discomfort versus avoid discomfort. And then you realize, oh, I get a little point in my little DQ app if I just listen and like hear the feedback, right? Changes the relationship. All right. Number 3 is fun filling. All right. So the other ones are the other ones are simultaneous solutions. So pairing, right? Fun fusing, putting things together at the same time. Framing, same thing. They happen simultaneously. Fun filling happens non-sequentially, or happens sequentially. It's not at the same time as the difficult thing. But fun filling really, really matters because it's one of the ways we fill up our resilience buckets. In other words, doing hard things all the time is not sustainable, right? It just isn't. And most people, most of the time, this is how burnout happens. Yeah. We need, in order to do this stuff sustainably, we have to charge up our tank or refill our tank with activities and people that are genuinely enjoyable, that we really like spending time with, doing or having or being with, in order to then have the resilience, the reserves to do the difficult things in our lives, to embrace those personal growth challenges. Without this particular step, it tends to fall apart. So I want you to think about this as like a, little deposits. So every time I do a fun activity, whether it's a self-care activity, whether it's genuinely doing something just for me, whether it's spending time with those I love, whether it's taking a little micro vacation or just, hosting a dinner party or whatever, which might sound stressful to some and joyful to others. Or maybe it's going to somebody else's dinner party. That sounds more enjoyable, doesn't it? But the point is, think of it as a fund deposit. This isn't just frivolous. This is an investment in my capacity to do hard things next week. That's how resilience works. This is a lot of psychologists writing about this. Rick Hansen at UC Berkeley and others, that positive emotions tend to fill up that reservoir of resilience, which then we bring to bear in hard situations, and we don't get so overwhelmed. We have more stress tolerance, right? So fun is not frivolous. It's an investment. All right. Lisa Feldman Barrett, very famous psychologist, refers to this as the body budget. You know, if you're just using the fuel all the time, you're going to run out. So you need to fuel up the tank. You have to fuel up the tank, or you're literally going to run out of it. So what fund deposits could you make? Just a sample. Just a sample. All right. Fun is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's just everywhere. It's just really a question of whether or not we see it and play and walk into it, or put on our serious face and just kind of get on with the business of being an adult, right? It's everywhere. It's actually everywhere. But you have to train your brain to see it, because otherwise we won't. But just a very simple, the list could be a mile long. Right? So start seeing those fun filling. Think of that piggy bank metaphor. I'm just making a little fun deposit so that in order to, right, do more challenging growth-filled activities over the course of the next week. Really matters. All right. I really want to make sure that we get to questions. All right. As a summary, fun fusing. So again, big gist is getting to the daily discomfort gym every day, the emotional discomfort gym every day, which indicates that I'm growing. How do we do this skillfully? Fun fusing, pairing things, difficult things with fun things. Fun framing, which is interpreting the discomfort as growth. That's a reframe, which makes it feel differently about it. Turning it into a game, right? Anything that changes the emotion that flows from it, that makes us feel more capable of handling the difficulty. And then event fun filling up that fun bank account, right? It's a really nice book called The Power of Fun. There's a handful of good books that have come out on fun in the last little bit. The Fun Habit is another nice one if anybody's interested in the science of fun. Okay, with that, let me just close by saying discomfort is really, again, this path to mastery. So mastery itself then becomes the reward. So once it becomes this momentum starts to build, we start realizing that discomfort is the price of growth, but growth itself is its own kind of reward. Then we start seeing discomfort as not something, again, to avoid, but really something as the signal in the noise that we're on the right path, right? And then mastery then fuels that continuation, because mastery always feels better than comfort. So next time, physically or literally, you're on the proverbial ice's edge and your brain is predicting that this is going to be bad. It's going to be awful. It's going to be so awkward. It's going to be so hard. What a difficult conversation. Just remember that on the other end of that, you're going to feel amazing. If you can just hold space for it, relate to it differently, and move through it and see it as an opportunity for growth rather than something to avoid. All right, with that, I just want to go into some questions and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, James, if I can just, in the chat room, if you look at the chat, there is from Magdalena, she has a question and a follow-up question. Rather than read it, I'll have you go ahead and see that there. If you go to the chat, it's just up a bit. It's one of the last things that was in the chat room there. And for the rest of you, you can also go in the chat room and see the question that Magdalena asked.
Yes. Sounds to me that when you describe what you describe is connecting discomfort with something with some reward feeling connected to dopamine. However, dopamine is a neurotransmitter of seeking circuit emotion and motivation. That's right. And play circuit runs on a different neurotransmitter, endocannabinoids. Yep. And it feels differently in our body than dopamine rush. Can you comment to that? Yeah, great question. I'll get to the second part in just a sec. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Magdalena. Dopamine is primarily a motivational neurochemical. So it makes us want things. Dopamine is the anticipation that something good is right around the corner. And so it then gives us a feeling of motivation to pursue or put in the effort to actually get that thing that we anticipate is going to feel good. That's dopamine. Endocannabinoids, among others, classes of what they call here and now neurochemicals. Dopamine is a future-oriented neurochemical, but here and now neurochemicals make us feel good in the present. It gets a little messy because lots of neurochemicals end up working in harmony, I think is the right way to think of it, in a sort of neurochemical cocktail. And those cocktails look very different from each other, but they're these beautiful creations of the brain. So I'll quickly comment on the polar plunge thing, which is a unique physiological thing because it's a cold shock response and these other things. It's very different than getting feedback, right? Dopamine is involved, but not before or during, after. As are the endorphins. And the endorphin rush in the cold plunge is actually the endorphins are usually the primary reason you feel so elated afterward. If you're combining it during, yeah, I do think it's probably accurate to pin that on endocannabinoids in terms of the playfulness and the sort of simultaneously joining of a difficult thing with a fun thing, that the fun thing, the thing that the neurochemical, I guess, that's eliciting is endocannabinoids. Endocannabinoids are a feel-good chemical. No surprise there. These are endogenous neurochemicals that feel a little bit like cannabis. That's why endocannabinoid, that's where the word comes from. They're naturally occurring in the brain. So yes, that distinction is meaningful, and I think you've nailed it. I'm also curious how to navigate fun with people who experienced trauma. Play circuit that is connected to fun is one of the most sensitive ones and shuts down first when we experience relational trauma. Do you have any thoughts about that? Yes, we've not given context here for folks with trauma, and most folks have. I'm thinking of Nicholas Epler's book, The Trauma of Everyday Life. Most of us have some form of trigger or difficult emotions or situations that trigger, varying forms of that activates a stress response basically in the body, right? But of course, lots of people have severe or incredibly difficult histories of trauma. And so this is a scenario where I think small wins in very safe environments is probably the most important thing. This is probably familial or home environments really starting out, but of course, work environments, if it's conducive to that, in some sense, there's a retraining of the nervous system when it comes to play, at least, that it's not only okay to play, but that it's safe to play, I think is actually the right way to think of it. If you look at with non-human animals, the only time the pups or cubs or whoever play is when one of the parents is on the lookout for danger. And so play is an extension of safety. And we move in plays like exploration, right? Exploration, testing boundaries, a whole host of different things that we're doing when we're playing, improvisation, figuring stuff out, problem solving, all of it's play. But there's a container in a sense that needs to be created. It's usually, again, with kids, it's or pups or whoever, it's an adult, a larger member of that scenario, looking for danger, and the kids or cubs or whoever will often look back at the parent to make sure that they're still vigilantly looking for danger, and then they'll go back to playing. There's this tethering that happens. And so again, all that's to say is recreating that and retraining a nervous system that's been traumatized to basically believe that it's okay and safe to play is a deeply involved process. But it is some of the most beautiful work, I think, that can be done in nervous systems. And I think it's important to reiterate that the research suggests that it can be done.
All right, thank you, James. I know we're just about at the end of our time here. I don't know if you have a link to share for your email of how people can get in touch with you, but as you're getting that loaded up, I am going to put in the chat room for all of you the link to our ICF Orange County events page, and that will have things coming up in the next couple of weeks here, especially. And one thing I do want to mention is one of the goals and objectives that our President Michael, who of course is on our session today, he wants to return to some in-person meetings. So this coming Thursday, we're having a mixer at Presto, which is in Huntington Beach. If you click on that link that I put in the chat room, you can look at that. That's this coming Thursday at 5:30 p.m. That's unfortunately an in-person meeting. So those of you outside of this time zone, this area, won't be able to join us for that. And then we do have next Tuesday, our Coaches Supporting Coaches series led by our own board member, Nahid. And so you can check on those two things. And also, James, in the chat room, there are some really nice, wonderful comments that people have said to you. And I want to make sure you're aware of those so that you see those. But again, James, this was phenomenal. And if you'd like to put in the chat room, or if you have a slide for that of sharing how people can get in touch. I see you scrolling there. Very good.
I'll just put it quickly here. This is just, I just have a course that Brain Science for Coaches, if anybody's interested in looking at that. There's just a discount code there for anybody. We'll start on March 23rd. So it's really about how the science connects to your coaching practice. And there's a link there. And then my email is also in the chat. You feel free to email me with any questions, or if you have any other questions about the presentation today that we weren't able to get to, please feel free to reach out.
Great, yes. Yeah, thank you again, James. We've got some good comments there. And one of the things I always like is when we have almost everybody who attended staying the whole time until the very end because they had other meetings they had to get to. So that's always a good sign. People weren't leaving. So a good indicator of this fun presentation and how we can incorporate that into our life and into our coaching. And thank you again, my friend. And we look forward to seeing many of you in our chapter, attending other events coming up here. And again, I wish you all a blessed day and everything. And again, reach out to James if you have any questions for him.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.